welcome to Sophie & Co. I'm Sophie Shepard-Natze. Jody Williams embarked on a crusade against landmines in the early 90s with few people behind her. Within several years, her modest NGO had grown into a globe-spanning network. Landmines were internationally banned, and she was awarded a Nobel Peace Prize. Now she's on a different mission, and killer robots are her target. She is our guest today.
From spears to guns, from chariots to tanks, humanity stops at nothing to invent new ways to kill. And with drones already making pilots history, armed robots are on their way. Is this a sci-fi nightmare coming to life? Will our lives end up at the mercy of machines? And what does it take to stand up and stop it before it's too late?
Our guest today is Jody Williams, political activist and the winner of the Nobel Peace Prize. Jody, it's so great to have you on our show. So you work to
Sophie, thank you for inviting me.
Yeah. So you work to get landmines banned, and that won you a Nobel Peace Prize. Now you're targeting what you call the killer robots, fully autonomous weapons. Tell us more about them for those who don't know what they are, in simple words.
Sure. I think when we say killer robots, most people think of drones. But killer robots are weapons that would make drones look primitive. At least with a drone, there is a human being who looks at a computer screen, sees the target, and pushes the buttons to fire the missiles and kill. Various militaries are doing research on weapons that would have no human being involved in the targeting and killing of human beings. And we found that shocking and horrifying, that people are really thinking it is okay to give the right to target and kill human beings to machines.
So these things haven't been used yet, right? Tell me more. Correct.
But there are many precursors to what we call killer robots. The U.S., for example, is testing the X-47B, which is a subsonic super drone, as it is called. The U.K. is testing the Tyrannus. European countries under France are testing the Neuron. China has just tested its own stealth drone. We're not quite certain about what Russia is testing, but I do know that Russia announced in 2013 that they would be opening a military robot center in 2014. And there are prototypes from the stealth drones all the way down to micro robots, which are the size of a mosquito, that could fly into a room and either do surveillance or fly into a room and, inject a toxin and kill the target. And it's very frightening that people think this is okay.
But wouldn't it still take a human being to actually switch it on and direct it one way or another?
It would take the robot to be programmed, but once it was set free, it would proceed to make the targeting and kill decisions, unless our campaign to stop killer robots is able to make certain that human beings have to be involved meaningfully in the kill decision.
Just because, before we get into the whole moral side of the story, I want to know a little bit more about the technicalities. So are these things uncontrollable once they're put in action, or can you actually stop them, reverse the action, bring them back?
That we don't know yet, because as you point out, these are still in the prototype and testing phase. Robotic scientists, some of whom are part of our campaign, talk often about what would happen if a squadron, for example, of stealth killer drones were set free and they were hacked. Just like computer hackers hack into, computer systems, there's no saying that they couldn't hack into a killer drone squadron and set it amok. Who then is responsible for the killings by the killer robots? Is it the programmer is it the programmer? Is it the commander somehow in charge of the squadron? Is it the person who programmed the robot? Is it the producer of the robot? In international law, there has to be a direct chain of command and accountability. That is another part of this that makes it ethically unsound and morally reprehensible, quite frankly.
Now, landmines were banned after many people suffered. Will you be taken seriously considering there have been no victims yet?
We have been taken seriously, which is one of the amazing things about this, Sophie. We only launched the campaign to stop killer robots in April of this year being 2013. And within 7 months, which is now, the international community is going to be taking up the question here in Geneva next May, I think it is, in a 4-day-long meeting on killer robots. And it will be governments of the world under the umbrella of the Convention on Conventional Weapons here in Geneva who will be addressing this issue. And we're hoping they will go further and we will continue a dialogue to lead to a new international instrument that would prohibit, you know, fully autonomous killer robots. So it's not something that we're being ridiculed for anymore. Although you're correct, when we first used the term killer robots, some people said we're using scare tactics. And that's not true. We want to capture public attention, which means you use language that makes people stop and think, but immediately militaries started responding to us, showing clearly that we are not making things up. This is not science fiction, and I wish it were, to be quite honest with you.
Jody, I'm just wondering, have you personally had a chance to talk to people, directly to people who are making these autonomous weapons? Do they actually consider the dangers of what they're building?
Well, I haven't spoken to them yet myself, but I intend to. They're aware. There is an increasingly robust dialogue about this, especially among lawyers, as you can imagine, on both sides of the argument. The anti-killer robot side saying that international law, as it stands now, cannot fully deal with this new technology. And others on the side that believe fully autonomous weapons are, you know, the best thing after sliced white bread, argue that they're a good thing and international law can deal with them and all we need is best practices. But when the United States, which is the only country to have done so far, produced its military directive on killer robot research, they actually listed a very long series of concerns that need to be looked at in terms of killer robots. So even the U.S. military, which has long considered that killer robots are inevitable and will be part of the U.S. military force, recognizes that these are very problematic. And we intend to amplify that, if you will.
But so what do you say to those who argue that autonomous systems are in our future? It's an irreversible process, and if governments don't use them in a regulated way, they will end up being used by rebel groups and non-government actors.
No, because rebel groups and non-government actors could never produce them on their own, unless high-tech militaries like the United States, Israel, South Korea, China, Russia, unless those militaries and the so-called defense industries produce them, rebel groups don't have the capacity. What we are trying to do is a preemptive ban, as was done with blinding laser weapons, for example, back in 1995 or 96. They were preemptively banned. We need to do this with killer robots. And we are not against robots. We are against weaponized, fully autonomous robots that have the kill decision over human beings. It's quite shocking that people think that's okay.
Okay, I get you. Ban it preemptively. I think it's a great goal. But does your
Yep.
campaign include semi-autonomous machines like drones?
No. It's not that there are members of our campaign that work on drones, but the legal rationale for drones and for killer robots is different. And we wanted to be very clear that we were preemptively dealing with a future system that is under research and development. Let's not imagine that they're somewhere in the far distant future. They are on our immediate horizon unless we stop them. Dealing with drones is, as I said, a very different legal approach. And to try to blend the two would make it a very difficult campaign, to be quite honest. And we don't believe that killer robots are inevitable. Nothing is inevitable except death, and we intend to stop them.
Okay, well, if you take drones apart from the killer robots, I just want to know your personal take on them. Can the use of drones to carry out attacks be morally justified? Is it okay?
I am personally morally and ethically offended by the use of drones. In fact, I was doing research for an article I was writing on the CIA, the U.S. military, the mercenary forces they employ, and the use of drones and its illegality under many circumstances, because I found them morally reprehensible. I think that the fact that these weapons can fly semi-autonomously for 7,000 miles to, the locations where, unfortunately, my military and the CIA are attacking people in countries with which we are not at war, to me is simply horrifying. And as many, already argue, it's a violation of international law. It's assassination. I do not support assassination by my government, period.
Jody, we're going to take a short break now, but when we're back, we're going to talk a little bit more about drones and who deserves the Nobel Peace Prize. We'll be back with Jody Williams, activist and Nobel Peace Prize winner. Stay with us, folks. We're back with Jody Williams, a Nobel Peace Prize winner and a political activist. So we're talking about drones right before the breaks. Many would argue that the sophisticated weapons like drones, despite all its disadvantages, are still better than humans at locating targets. Plus, the life of the pilot is safe.
Others argue that such weapons that remove a human being from actual military action make it easier for a country to go to war. I believe firmly that too many countries already find it easy to go to war. We do not need weapon systems that make it easier for one country to kill people in another without having to suffer the consequences of their military actions. There has been a young former drone pilot who has spoken publicly about what happened to him as a drone pilot. And he was talking about people, think that it isn't traumatic. And he said that it is. So closely watching people run because you can hear the coming of a drone. It traumatizes entire, villages and populations. And watching people run to try to escape them and then be blown to smithereens, as we say in English, he said it's quite horrifying. However, if he were on the ground, maybe he wouldn't make the same decision. I worry mostly about my country because we're the country that uses drones primarily. And we attack targets in Yemen, Somalia. We've attacked in Libya, Sudan. I heard that there might have been an attack in Indonesia. We are not at war with those countries. What right do we have to assassinate people? If we had to send our military in, it would be a completely different story. Another ethical issue about drones, though, is that they give no quarter. which is an important aspect of military engagement. Giving no quarter means that the enemy has no possibility of surrender. You know, when they target a person and decide to blast them with the Hellfire missiles, they have no way to surrender. They are just blown up. That is morally and ethically bankrupt. And, you know, many of us argue, including U.S. active duty military, that it is causing a huge backlash against the U.S. and is inspiring more so-called terrorists to take up, you know, a battle against the United States of America.
So, I mean, your life has been this selfless mission all along, and you won a Nobel Peace Prize, and you sure as hell deserved it, and many more, if you ask me. But do you generally believe that those people who get Nobel Peace Prizes usually always deserve it?
Not always. Certainly not. I have big issues with people in politics or political positions where they can engage in war receiving a peace prize. I think that's a little bit crazy.
So you don't think Obama deserved a Nobel Peace Prize?
I have said it publicly many times, so I won't shy from saying it now. First off, I think it is the fault of the Nobel Committee at that time for selecting him. Mr. Nobel's will is very clear about the terms that should be followed in selecting a recipient of the Peace Prize. And expressions of future possibilities, as Mr. Obama was talking about in terms of nuclear disarmament, expressions of the future are not terms of the will. So I think the Nobel Committee itself made an egregious error. And when Mr. Obama came out of the White House and said that he knew he did not deserve the Peace Prize, I was proud of him for that moment. And I wish he had continued to say, therefore, I cannot accept it. So there you go. And I don't think Henry Kissinger ever deserved it.
But who do you believe deserves a Peace Prize that hasn't already received it?
Oh, my God, I could list many. You know, I happen to think that the people who wage war don't deserve the Peace Prize. I happen to believe that the people on the ground fighting, and I don't mean militarily fighting, struggling to keep, you know, communities alive, struggling to promote peaceful solutions in the context of war, they're the ones who deserve the Peace Prize. I will be quite honest, I have nominated an Attorney General of Guatemala 2 times now for the Nobel Peace Prize. Her name is Claudia Paz y Paz. She is from Guatemala. Under her, the former dictator of Guatemala was tried and convicted of crimes against humanity, war crimes, genocide, when he was the president and killing Mayan Indians in the so-called Civil War in the 1980s in Guatemala. I think she deserves the Peace Prize. She is challenging immunity and impunity, which are 2 of the things that cause dictators and heads of state to believe that they can do whatever they want because nothing will happen to them. You know, if we can really attack impunity through the International Criminal Court, for example, through domestic courts like Paz y Paz has done in Guatemala, we will make a huge leap forward in dealing with war criminals and perhaps convincing future possible war criminals that they should not commit war crimes. I think she is very deserving. You
seem super confident in every step you make. It's like there's no stopping you, and thank God for that. I mean, you have physically been assaulted and attacked because of your activism, and you're still not scared. I mean, how do you put the fear aside? Like, what keeps you going every morning when you get up?
You know, I was thinking about this the other day. Because I was at a meeting of women parliamentarians and talking about women's leadership, whether it's in parliaments or in companies or in activism. And I was thinking about the 6 women who are part of the Nobel Women's Initiative. And every one of us is fearless and fierce in our belief that we can make the world a better place. We're fearless and fierce in righteous indignation at injustice. I mean, that's what makes me move. When I feel in my heart, fire in my heart about a situation, I can't not do something. You know what I mean? I can't hold myself back from. So that's what led me to, start pushing groups to create a campaign to stop killer robots. When I learned about them, I was so freaked out. I was terrified. Totally, honestly, I was terrified. And then I knew I had to do something to try to address this issue publicly. We deserve to have global conversation about how wars are conducted in our names. And I feel fierce about making sure this doesn't happen. It is not inevitable.
Well, we have time just for one last question. You say that worry without real action is a waste of time. But what if you feel helpless?
Correct.
I mean, how can an ordinary person stop governments from doing whatever they're doing?
My dear, I'm an extremely ordinary person. I come from a village of 1,200 people in the teeny state of Vermont. Neither my mother nor my father finished high school. And yet they encouraged me to be what I wanted to be in the world. And I went out, and the first thing I did was volunteer in an organization working on El Salvador. There's nothing magic about it. I recently wrote a memoir of grassroots activism in which I talk about that. I talk about my very, meager and poor, family life. We were rich with love and support, but we didn't have money. I write about the fact that I was a confused college kid, like so many. I write about the fact that I made mistakes in life. And yet, I never, veered from my belief that we all have the capacity to contribute to a better world. You don't have to be a full-time activist like I am. I somehow had the privilege of finding this path in my own life. But I try to imagine if everybody in the world who really wanted a better world for us all, even people they don't like, if everybody just volunteered a few hours a month on whatever issue they feel passionate about. It doesn't have to be mine. It doesn't have to be killer robots. It doesn't have to be weapons. It doesn't have to be, I work on climate change as well. But anything that makes for a better community, if you volunteer, then you're empowering yourself to use we each have power, and we either choose to use it or not. And I chose to use it, and I will continue to use it until I die, because I believe we all have responsibility as well as rights. And I'm exercising mine forever.
Jody, thank you so much for this wonderful interview. I think you're incredible, and you inspire even the most unpassionate of us. So keep on going. We're all with you. Thanks for being with us today, Jody Williams, a political activist and Nobel Peace Prize winner. That's all we have today, folks, and I'll see you in the next edition of Sophie & Co.